do the songs for the change. We do not care what remains. We just say what we say. We the first one out late. Songs for change.
So, hello and welcome in today's podcast episode where we'll be discussing human rights with our special guest, Barbora Gregová, who is a student of architecture. Welcome, Barbora.
Thank you for having me. It's a privilege, really.
Thanks. It's a privilege to have you here. And so I would start with our first question, which is, what does the term human rights mean to you? And what do you imagine when you hear this term?
I think I would start with an architecture metaphor, even though it's really on the nose. For me, the human rights are like the good foundation of a building. So when we want to build a society of equality, we need to have like good human rights, and we need to understand them, and we need to implement them in the society.
Wow, thank you very much. It's really beautifully said. Okay, so moving on to the next question. Which human right is the most important one for you?
Mm-hmm. I don't think there is a hierarchy within the human rights, but because I'm studying architecture, the one that I'm mostly thinking about is the right to adequate housing. And that's like the closest to what I'm studying. So that's the one.
Okay. So regarding your answer, now could we talk a little bit about like the current housing problem that we have in Slovakia? What do you think about this housing problem in Slovakia, and why do you think this situation happened?
Mm-hmm. Yes, we are currently facing a housing crisis in Slovakia. So there are not enough housing available for the people that maybe want to rent. And why it occurred, I'm not a specialist, but I think there are certain aspects that maybe caused it. In Slovakia, we are used to buying houses or buying flats. We all just want to own an apartment. We need to have our own apartment. We don't want to pay rent every month. In Slovakia, we don't want to be dependent on anyone. We want to have our own space. And I think that one part of why we are facing such crisis in these days is that even not only people, but even those that are building the apartment buildings and the houses, they don't want to rent them out. They just want to sell them. So the developers, they don't want to rent out these apartments that they built. They just want to sell, and I think that's creating even a bigger gap between the richer and the poorer, because the poorer, they can afford to just buy the flat or the house, and the richer, they will buy 3 if they could. And for example, in Bratislava, there are a lot of new apartment buildings being built and have been built, and all of the flats are just selling out. Nobody is renting, and that's a big problem, because then the people that really need housing or are maybe, I don't want to say poorer, they just don't have enough money at that moment to just buy the flat, because they are really pricey. 1 meter squared is 10,000 euros.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's a lot
in Bratislava. So that's a lot. So then they don't have enough money to buy it at the moment, but they would like to have some housing. So maybe for them, renting a flat would be appropriate. But we don't have that in Slovakia. Nobody is building this type of apartment buildings. So I think that's one one aspect of this problem. And maybe I don't know why developers don't wanna build these type of buildings. It's maybe because they want a quick money, and that can be caused by the political situation and the political instability in Slovakia. I totally understand that as a developer, you come to Slovakia, you don't know how it's gonna be in 5 years, so you just want a quick cash. So, yes.
Yes, thank you very much for explaining that. Well, now we can move on to the topic of homelessness. So, could you please describe closely the issue of homelessness in Slovakia? Like,
Sure.
how is our state facing this issue regarding architecture also? Because that is your subject. So, could you describe it more for us?
Yes, sure. Homelessness is a very big problem in Slovakia, and our state is, I think, it's failing in the way they are dealing with this issue, and I think it's really important to have like a good schemes put in place, good housing schemes, because homelessness, there is 3 types of homelessness. We have visible homelessness, then hidden homelessness, and potential homelessness. And in reality, we are all potential homeless people. So sometimes it's a matter of seconds. Maybe natural disaster strikes, or it's a issue of war, or maybe some individual tragedy, yes, that can leave us homeless, and we are suddenly in the streets. So basically, we are all just potential homeless people. So that is why I think we should have some better understanding of this issue, and our state should implement housing schemes or better housing schemes. And the issue with that is that even though right to adequate housing is a human right that is recognized by the political treaties of our state, but we don't even have it in our constitution. So in our constitution, we don't have the right to adequate housing. And what I wanted to say basically is that when you imagine a homeless person, they're usually living in the bigger cities and in the city centers, especially because that's where they can make a living. We can say it like that. They are not living in the suburbia, and they are not living in the countryside. We only see homeless people in the cities. So that's an urban problem, basically. And even if we have, sometimes in the bigger cities, we have like some housing opportunities for these homeless people. So there is a place they can come there. They pay just like a symbolic fee, maybe sometimes like 50 cents for a night. They have a place to stay. They have a place to shower and to maybe wash their clothes. But even if we have establishments like these establishments are not within the city center, and they are not within the walking area of the people that are homeless. They are usually in the suburbia. They are usually like 6 kilometers away from the city center. So that's a big problem. And we need to think about it when we are planning our cities. We need to think about the spaces that we need to create for these people. And moreover, even if you are a homeless person and if there is some facility within your reach and you manage to get there, the living conditions there are just horrible. So
Really?
we don't even have yes, because we don't have norms for those type of housing. So for example, for the usual apartments, we know like how big the room for one person needs to be, or even for dorms. We know that we have just 8 meters squared for one person. It's for the dorms, for example. For these, they are usually giving 4 meters squared per person for these establishments. And if you take that just a bed, just a normal bed, a single, it's 2 meters squared. So you are left with what, 2, maybe 1 meter squared for the person, for its like living space. And it wouldn't be that big of a problem if it was just like a separated, not like cell, but if they use like a cellular system where the person they have their own space. But they usually doing it that they have like a big hall and they have like 16 beds there. It's bed and the bedside table, bed and a bedside table, bed and a bedside table. So the living conditions are, just if they're there for the night, just the sleeping conditions are horrible. So
thanks for your answer. Also, regarding this question, I have another one about like the architecture in the city center and if it is homeless people friendly, I would say, because I often notice that, for example, benches have these really like strange shapes, just so that homeless people would not sleep there, like.
Yes, it's a big trend in the cities to use this like hostile design or hostile architecture, or sometimes we can call it anti-human architecture. So our public spaces are equipped with a furniture that it's made especially uncomfortable to sleep on, so that homeless people are pushed outside of the public spaces and they need to find other places to sleep.
But it is not really like taking care of the problem. It's just like hiding the.
It's just even creating more problems, because the people are pushed outside of the city center, but they cannot really get to the housing or the establishment that they can provide their housing. So they are like in the middle and they really don't know like where to sleep.
Okay, thank you very much for explaining that to us. Now, moving on to the next question, I would like to ask you if you could please describe the issue of marginalized Roma communities, and also like how were they created, what is like behind it all.
So currently in Slovakia, we can see that Roma communities are living in establishments that are outside of the limits of our settlements. So they are usually 2 to 3 kilometers from our villages. And it was created, it started during the communist regime, when we as a people and our, I don't want to say it was just about the politics. I think it's a racism problem. It's a problem of our society. And we just went with it when we started pushing them from our settlements, and Roma people couldn't build houses within the borders of the village or of the city. So that is why they're currently living 2 to 3 kilometers away from our settlement. And it's a big problem. It creates even more problems for these communities, because sometimes they don't even have running water, electricity, gas, heating systems. All the shops and maybe healthcare and schools, they need to walk back. If they want to go to school, or they want to buy something, they need to walk back 3 kilometers. So that it's also creating just more and more separation within these communities. And what is also a big problem, it's a problem of transportation, because our system of transportation of buses and trains, we don't even take into consideration that, there is like more people living in the settlements outside of the villages. We are just going to stop the bus in the village, and then the people, they can just walk to their settlement. Or if they need to catch a bus, they need to walk 3 kilometers to catch a bus. And the problem with the transportation is only creating more problems, and it's even harder to include these people within our society. It's even harder to get a job if you have to walk 3 kilometers every morning just to the bus stop.
Yes. On the other hand, do you think this situation could be changed or improved in the future somehow?
Mm-hmm. I believe that this situation can be changed. The same with the homelessness, and the same with the isolation of Roma communities. I think that we as architects, I'm gonna talk about architects, or just for architects. For me as an architect, I think that we can solve these problems, not only with architecture, but with the way we plan our cities and with the way we create our general city plan. We need to take into consideration that those settlements that are outside of the city limits, we need to connect them with our city. We need to create some bridges with them. Also, those settlements are usually it's just housing. It's just people living there. There are no schools, there are no shops, so we need to create some spaces for that too within those settlements. Yes, and I think that's just the start of trying to solve this problem.
Yes. Wow, thank you very much for sharing your opinions and your ideas with us. And also thank you for being here today with us. And we will see you in our next podcast episode.
Thank you.